Lord. All right, good morning, good day. 13th of the month of Menachem. Yes, this last Shabbos starts the 7 weeks of consolation or comfort. Sheva de Menachemta, which started from the double comfort of Shabbos Nachamu and goes up to the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. So we're in a whole new movement. Very up. Alabai. Should be that way for each of us. Anyway, 13th of Menachem. So the Chumash says, speak of them when you sit, right? When you sit in your house, etc. So our sages explain that speaking of them, what's the them? Refers to words of Torah. However, in Torah study itself, there are many gradations, many levels, and all these gradations are here explained now. When you're sitting in your house, refers to the soul's occupation with Torah. When it's at home, where's the home? In the trove of souls before its descent to this lowly world. We're already speaking Torah. And then when you go on your way, refers to the time during which the soul descends from one world to the other, down and down, from level to level, plane to plane, until it comes below to this lowest world to be invested in a physical body. There the soul is leftecha b'derech. It's going on in the way of this world until the time of old age, until when you lie down. When man's appointed time arrives, then too the Torah will protect him, as explained in chapter 6 of Pirkei Avos, until the resurrection. When you rise up again, when you awaken, then again the Torah will be spoken from your mouth. Very interesting. The Torah is with you in all stages of development, and lying down and passing on to the next world is one of the developmental stages, right, leading to the resurrection. Okay. Chew on that. Lessons in Tanya. We're beginning a new letter, letter 5, on page 68 in Lessons in Tanya, and in Likutei Amorim on page 212. This letter goes for 7 pages, and this is one of the deeper, not that they're all deep, they all have deep meaning, but one of the, right on the surface, more difficult letters. We will do what we can do to make it clear, but it may be a lot of new ideas here. It begins with a pasuk in Shmuel. V'yas David Shem. David made a name. And simple meaning is he made a name for himself. Lessons in Tanya gives a couple explanations. He made a name for himself because he buried all of his enemies and took care of them and cleaned up after him, so to speak. And on the other hand, that's one. And the other because of his great heroism, his great strength. He was called an Anshe Shem, a man of name. But this name, this word, he made a name. The Alter Rebbe is going to refer this to the name of Hashem, the name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. And he's going to explain how that name emerges from God's, we're attaching words like preconscious, God's own preconscious or superconscious, to consciousness, and then becomes operative, Yud Chachma, He Bina, Vav, the 6 Midos, and Malchus. That's a structure that I hope everybody can keep in mind, or if not, put on paper, because that's what we're going to be discussing for the next 7 pages. The emergence from deep levels of consciousness of the name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? The Tetragrammaton, the holy name of God. Yud Chachma, wisdom, the point of Chachma. He Bina, He is expansive, that's understanding. Vav is the 6 midos from Chesed to Yesod, and Malchus expands again. Okay, and David made the name. So this is all going to refer to us down here below. This is what David did. David Melech HaMashiach, Mashiach. He worked down here below to elicit from Hashem the emergence of the Yud Ke Vav Ke, from the deeper levels of God consciousness to the operative levels throughout all of creation. I know what I just said is a fairly abstract idea, but that's the idea that we're going to be exploring for the next 7 pages. And with that, we're going to develop a probably new understanding of letters and language. Okay, we'll start. The As David Shem. David made a name. And actually, on this one, I would appreciate if you interrupt, meaning I'll look up occasionally or take yourself off mute. But I'd like to answer the questions as we go, because there probably will be questions as we go. Okay, Upirish V'Zoya Kodesh. This expression from Shmuel is explained. We're going right into Kabbalah, right into the Sod, not the Yesod, the Sod, the deepest, the secret levels of the Torah. Mishum Shenema, and because it says, there's a pasuk, V'hi David Eisa Mishpat V'Tzedakah L'Kol Amai. Excuse me, this pasuk says, David, he made judgment and righteousness. Remember, the theme here is always of late and pretty much throughout tzedakah, right? The mitzvah. David made judgment and tzedakah, L'Kol Amei, for his entire people. So the Zohar says like this, Bachar Rav Shimon, the author of the Zohar, he wept, cried, Ve'omer, and he said, Man Ovid Shemot Kedisha B'chol Yoima, who makes the holy name each and every day? Man V'yohav Tzedakah L'miskene, one who gives tzedakah to a poor person. So Reb Shimon is saying, realize how much you have in your hand, how much you have that you can accomplish. And to the extent that he's crying for this, who is it who actually makes the holy name? In other words, brings the holy name and the holy letters, Yud Ke Vav Ke, from deep in God's consciousness into actuality, so that God's Chochmah, and then his Bina, and then his Midos, and his Shekhinah are operative throughout all of creation. One who gives tzedakah to a poor person. That's what Reb Shimon cried about. So what does he mean? But Yuvin will understand this by preceding Maimar Razal, a saying from our sages, on the pasuk, Ki b'yud ke Hashem sur olamim. This is a pasuk in Yeshayahu. It says, with the yud and the hey, Hashem formed all the worlds. So these letters are building blocks. Just like with letters that come out of your mouth, you build a concept or an idea, and you express it, and the idea takes shape through letters of thought and letters of speech. So with letters, you make words, and words have semantic, and semantic, which is meaning, has influence. So similarly, God brings forth from his deeper levels of consciousness these letters, and with the Yud and the Hey, we're forgetting the Vav Ke for a minute, with the Yud and the Ke, he creates worlds. The Hey Nivra Olam Hazeh, Yud and Hey. With the Hey, the second letter, he created this world. And the Yud, with the Yud, the first letter, the deeper level, he created Olam Haba. 2 letters, 2 worlds. This world and the future world to come. Hirush, which means the great pleasure that souls of the righteous have, the nenin meziv hashekhinah, and the delight that they have from the ray of the Shekhinah, Amer Began Eden, which shines in the Garden of Eden, Began Eden Elyon B'Tachton, in the upper level of Gan Eden and the lower level of Gan Eden. Great pleasure that tzaddikim have, Hushemis Angim Yahasagosam, their pleasure, their light, their enjoyment comes from their understanding, the hiskaltum, and their conceptualizing, that they get with their seichel, with their intellect, and they know, yodim, masigim, and they grasp, they get and they grasp some of the light and the life force which flows there in the upper and lower level Gan Eden from the Ein Sof, from the Infinite One, the manner which is revealed to their souls. This is the delight of souls, as we spoke in Ayom Yom. The light of the soul when it passes up to the next world, the out-of-body experience as we return closer to this place from which we were hewn, or from which our souls were hewn in the first place. So there's a great pleasure for the souls. And there's a great spirit of understanding. Down here, we don't understand. We largely, our grasp of godliness and the presence of God is largely through a movement. I mean, through his blindness, which we talked about, we do get some appreciation, how it's clear that everything is alive, and if everything is alive, for instance, there must be something giving life to it. But the geschmack of Hashem is something that really pretty much as a whole, at least comparable to the soul when it's out of body, eludes us. And that is captured in our Bina when our soul is up above. That's where we can actually understand and grasp some kind of grasping, each and every person, according to the person's level, and according to what we've done. Remember, the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah, right? That's the expression. So according to what we have understood, and primarily according to what we have done, that will be the fruit, the fruit in the next world. And because this is a function of understanding, something which we don't have here, really understanding, being able to grasp God in our mental constructs, in our seichel. So it's called b'shem bina. It's called bina, understanding, b'zohar HaKodesh, in the Holy Zohar. This grasping that will be of the soul, that the soul will have, and the delight that the soul will have in the world to come. And this understanding comes from Chochmah Elah. Go back to, hopefully, your mental picture, or if you have it on paper, Chochmah Bina. Right? Chochmah gives to Bina. So, understanding comes from a higher level, which is called Chochmah. Shehu Mokar HaHaskolah, which Chochmah is the source of intellect. V'hasoga, it's the source of intellect and grasping. Hanikra b'shem Bina, which that's called Bina. When you get it, when you grasp it, that's Bina. V'hu kadmus haseichel, and it's the primordial, or the predecessor for intellect. Chochmah is the predecessor for what we call intellect. It's a mind faculty, but it's not intellect, which is intellect grasping. With my mind, I get it, right? And when you get it, that's called Bina. But something is infusing Bina from on high, from higher, which is Chochmah. So it's called Kadmus Haseichel, the more predecessor, the more primordial level of intellect. Before intellect becomes actually revealed. Now, as we're going here, think about this is all a metaphor for Hashem. The Yud K Vav K, that's his name. David made a name. He brought the Yud K Vav K down into this world, right? Which is what we, all of us, are charged with, to bring revelation of Elokus into this world. So as we map these levels of understanding, Yud Chochmah, He Bina, etc., what we're doing is mapping the emergence of the active name, the name which is active and forming and informing all of creation. So now we're talking about it in a person, but think this, we've made in God's image, right? So just as we have this power, Yud K Vav K, of wisdom, understanding, midos, and malchus, and doing, so he has these structures also, if you could say such a thing, kaviyachol, to say so. But the analogy is there, and the analogy is given to us to use. That, as Eov says, from my flesh I can see godliness. From understanding the way we're structured, we have some grasp of the way God is so-called structured. So just that we have kadmus of seichel, something deeper than actual seichel and intellect, which we call chokmah. So God has chokmah. That's the yud of the Shem Havaya, and the hey is the bina of the Shem Havaya. So the Shem Havaya starts in chokmah, and then it flows into bina. And in bina is generally where there's a revelation of understanding. But it's still concealed. Remember, bina, this is in your head, right? Chochmah, bina, even das. This is all in your head. You haven't revealed anything yet to the outside world. So Yud K, both the Yud and the K, Chochmah and bina, are in the Godhead, so to speak, in a concealed way, a manner of Helen Behester, concealment. A little bit here and there, Shafeya flows, Nimshach Misham, and flows down from there, Libechinas Bina, from Chochmah to Bina. A little bit of what's in Chochmah flows down into Bina, to understand and to grasp what's called Seichel HaNelam, the hidden dimensions of intellect. Chochmah is the hidden one. Right? Chochmah has a connection with the ayin, the hidden levels. Revelation starts in Bina. Chochmah is called Nikon B'Shem Nakuda Behekola B'Zohar Kodesh. It's called the point in the chamber in the Holy Zohar. This is Chochmah, the point in the chamber. We talked about this. Well, actually, it was on Shabbos. We were talking another mimer. The point has no dimension. And then it expands, and it expands downward and expands sideways. Downward and sideways is the letter A. So Chochmah is the point in the chamber, in the palace. Zuhi Tamunis Yud. And that's the shape of the letter Yud of the Shem Havaya Baruch Hu. So again, Shem, name. So when we're alluding back to David, King David made a name. He brought forth the revelation of godliness, Yud Ke Vav Ke, from way up down into, he's the Messiah of that generation, down here into, and then through Shlomo HaMelech, his son, and it says, Yofa koyecha ben koyecha, better is the power of the son than the power of the father. Shlomo actually built it and instantiated it with the building of the first temple. God's presence on earth. So David brought it down. He brought the Yud of the Shem Havaya Baruch Hu, V'nikra Eden. This, now we're going to, the Yud of the Shem Havaya is called Eden. So when we say in English, Gan Eden, Garden of Eden, it really is not the way it's meant to be understood. It's not the way that it is understood. It's not the Garden of Eden. It's a garden whose source is a place called Eden. It's like, imagine a waterfall, right? So there's the water on top, that's called Eden. And the water flows down and waters the garden down here below. So Eden is the top, which is Chochmah, and it comes down and expands itself into the garden in the letter Hey, which is the two levels of understanding in Gan Eden Elyon, Gan Eden Tachton, the upper level of Gan Eden, the lower. So the Hey comes down, Havaya Baruch Hu. So the Yud of the Shem Havaya Baruch Hu, the Nikra Eden. The Yud is called the high place, Eden. Asher Alav Nema, on which it says about Eden, Ayin le'ira'osa, no eye can see me, and it goes and live. No eye can see me and live. That is so deep in the Godhead, just like you can't see, or someone else can't see into your Chochmah, your Bina, but certainly not into your Chochmah. So no one can see into the level of Chochmah Elah, the supernal level of Chochmah, which is hinted at by the dot of the letter Yud. V'nikra Abba Yesod Brata. And that's called, that point, that little dot, which is the Yud, is called the Father. Chochmah is created with the Father, is related to the Father, and Bina to the Mother. And ultimately, the Father and the Mother, the seed of the Father, gives birth and foundation to the Brata, to the daughter, which is Malchus. Chacham is the father, Bina is the mother, the daughter is Malchus. Pirish, which means Kihine hishabis ha'oisius adibur. Now this is an explication of letters and letters of speech, which I must say the first time I learned this was totally new to me. And if you're learning this for the first time, it will probably be totally new to you. So we're talking about letters, right? Yud, K, emerging from pre-conscious to conscious. Where do these letters come from? Right? These letters, Yud, K, Vav, K, or any letters, which are the building blocks of all of reality, right? He spoken words, which are combinations of letters. Where do they come from? Pirish. The coming into being, the being of letters, of speech, which come out from the 5 articulated powers of the mouth. This is the teeth, the tongue, the palate, the throat, and the lips. Yeah? The 5 ways that voice comes out of the mouth. These letters, they're not conceptual. One doesn't think about what letters are going to come out of one's mouth. And neither are they planted in these particular 5 places of flesh in the mouth. In order that you should bring forth utterances of letters through the breath, right? I mean, what's happening here? The plain breath. I'm speaking now. What's happening? There's a breath. I'm not thinking about this, but there's a breath coming out, and I'm not having any thought whatsoever about the letters. I'm having a lot of thought about what I'm going to say, the words, but the letters that make them up, I'm not thinking about them at all. So these letters, they come out through the utterances of the breath, the 5 articulated powers of the mouth, through the breath, the hakoil, and the voice, hamaka bahen, which strikes each one or any one or combinations of these 5 articulated powers of the mouth. Al pi derech hateva, and that's the way we are constituted. That's our nature. That's why we're called a medaber. And but as we explore this, I think we'll get a really deeper understanding of why the human being is called a medaber, the speaking one, and not, let's say, the intellectual one. I mean, our quality of mind is clearly different, and our quality of conceptualization is clearly different and on a higher level than animals, yet we're called hamedaber, the speaking one. This will shed some light on why as we go. So the letters are not coming out because they are embedded in the nature of these 5 articulated powers, nor are they coming out from me thinking about them, these letters. They're not coming out through the seichel. For example, asfasayim, the lips of der mashal. Shoisis, if you take the lips, but lips you have bays, the letter bays is a plosive, that's what they call it in English, plosive from the lips, vov, right? Vov with the lips, mem and pe, these letters. So these letters which come out, and he's just taking one group of letters, the ones that comes from the lips. The fact that they come out from the lips, the fact that they do come out from the lips, it's not that the lips have the power, or that the seichel is consciously putting together these letters. And thinking about, okay, how am I going to move my mouth this way or that way? I mean, you would never be able to speak, not the way we speak, if all of that seichel were involved in the letters. Which are moving, vibrating through the breath. Behevel echad, you have one breath and you're saying many different letters. Koil echad, and one voice. Apogeya behen, b'shava, which is striking the lips in this case, all equally. And I've got a bez and a vov and a pei. Nothing to do with my intellect. That would, if I had to think about it, it would take anyone forever to say a word. So it's coming from much deeper. Adarabah. Shini hatenuas v'sayim, the actual change in movement of the lips, ulefi shinu biti ha'oisis shebaratzon ha'nefesh, is because of the difference in the articulation of the letters as they are rooted in the will of the soul. Well, the soul speaks, right? It speaks, Nefesh medaberes, we have the speaking soul. But the speaking soul goes back to the thinking part of the soul. And then deeper than that, and even deeper than Chokhmah, is what we call Ratzon, the crown. So he makes his first assertion about language. Language comes from the Ratzon Shebenefesh. It's embedded in the most deep levels of the soul, higher and deeper than Chokhmah, and certainly higher than Bina, and certainly higher than the movement of the lips, which are a result of them. They're rooted in the Ratzon HaNefesh. Levatabis Vasayim, one articulates with his lips, Kiratzoinoi, according to what the soul wants to say. Layman, Es Beis, the soul wants to say, or Es Beis, or Vav, or Mem, these different letters, or Pei. But it's not that the opposite. It's not the opposite. It's not that the will is pushing against these powers and saying, do it this way and do it this way. The way they are moving now. This is not through some kind of conscious application of the will against the musculature and the capabilities of the lips. To say these four letters, the four letters he said in the just the articulative power of the lips. We see in actuality, the lips are not going according to some conscious will that we have, do it this way or do it that way. Pei, vov, mem, beis. No, there's nothing going on there in the lips. The lips are responding automatically to a deeply rooted source in the soul, which is called Ratzon, deeper than Seichel, and that's where language is rooted. Not in Seichel, in Ratzon, in the deeper part of the soul. And even more we can say, but if you take the Nakudas, like Seire, Pata, etc. When you say the Nakudas, Nakudas comets, when the soul, the will of the soul wants to bring forth from the mouth a nakuda like a comet's or a zaima mela, automatically nikmotzim hasfoim, the lips purse, automatically, no thinking. But patach, the lips automatically flatten out, they open up. And it's not that the Ratzon HaNefesh, the will of the soul, says likmaitz, compress, and don't open up, klal v'klal. So he says, the ein laharik b'davar hapashit u'movin muskul l'kol maskil. And there's no need to go on further with this, because everyone understands this. Well, I didn't understand this until I learned it over here, that the power of speech is a soul power embedded deep in the soul, much deeper than even Chokhmah. It's in the Ratzon, the crown of the soul. And that's why a human being is called a medaber. Not because he has this external ability to say what's on his mind. His whole quality of speech is rooted deeper than on his mind as part of his nefesh, of his deep internality. So he says, now this is all a prelude, by the way, to understanding the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which we'll get to tomorrow. But we'll conclude this piece. Alter Rebbe says, and I don't have to elaborate and to say this is something that's pashut, is simple and understood to anybody who understands anything. That the utterance of letters and the nakudas, the vowels, is much deeper than intellect, understood intellect. Ella miseichel hanel. It comes from the place, we call it the Ratzon of the Nefesh, he now calls it the hidden levels of intellect, the pre-conscious, before consciousness. And it's also called kadmus haseichel, the primordial, the primordial predecessor to intellect. That's where the letters of language come from. They're called kadmus haseichel shebenefesh, that primordial level of intellect, deeper than conscious intellect in the soul. Hamidaberes, that's where, and that's we have the expression, nefesh mehamidaberes. That's it. When God created man, he created a speaking soul. If you look in Chumash, a speaking soul. The soul itself, and not the mind, the conscious mind, the brain, and certainly not the lips themselves. The soul itself is the source of the language that a person speaks and the utterances that and empowers. That's why it empowers immediately. I don't have to think about what letter do I say. I have to think about concepts, as I said earlier, but not letters. I sometimes have to think about the right word, but I never think about, and you don't either, about letters, because the letters are coming from a more primordial source. And why are we talking about letters? Because it's with the letter Yud, he created Olam Haba. With the letter Hey, he created Olam Hazeh. Or with the letter Hey, Yud, he created the upper level of Gan Eden, and Hey with the lower level of Gan Eden. Letters themselves are embedded in a soulful creative energy that comes from Kadmus HaSeichel, or what we call Nefesh HaMidaberes, the speaking soul. And that's why Ein Hatinik Yochel Ledaber. That's why a small child, can't speak Av Shemevin Hakol, even though he understands everything. I'm sure I hope you've had an experience. I have. I have one now. A less than just over 1 year old understands everything, but still doesn't yet have language, because the soul hasn't matured yet to bring forth the language from that level which we call Kadmus HaSeichel, the predecessor into the deeper level before intellect. That's where we're holding today on our journey, as I say, 7 pages in regular Tanya, to understand what it means to make a name, to bring God's name into reality. DB, I don't know who DB is.
Oh, it's Chayanka. I forgot to change my name.
Oh, okay, fine.
My thing won't change it. What I was thinking about was that an infant, you watch infants, I'm talking about real infants, like vocalize.
Oh, they make noises.
They make noises.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. That's why it's not coming from the level of Seichel.
Yeah. But they don't yet have the language, right? But from those noises, something coming somewhere deep emerges ultimately the letters. Yeah, this thing, when I'm thinking, goes around, when you know what he wants, you know what he doesn't want, but he can't say it yet.
But I was thinking, is that why, when you're talking about infants, that I'm talking, let's say a month-old baby that babbles and coos and they're going, and mama, 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 they're making noises. And I'm wondering if that's why they're able to make those noises, because it's coming not from intellect, from deeper.
I don't know. The way he lays it out here is that deeper level is where the letters are, and that's what's going to emerge later. So I don't know. I have nothing to say about that. Maybe you're right. It could be
so
right.
Then Goyim, though, have this. This is where our souls must be similar, because we all speak.
Well, the human species is a medaber.
Okay.
Sure. The whole species. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. So, Abechain.
Oops. Just to say thank you. It's actually a very amazing and informationally opening shiur. And what came up for me is that it actually shows the koyach of unity in the world that we've developed about all language, all communication. Because it comes from such a deep level, so it's all unified with Hashem.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You mean the language and the ability to speak is what brings us all together? Is that what you mean? Or maybe not?
All come from the same source, not just because of the language.
But
it's all coming from a unified place in Hashem's.
It's coming from Kadmus HaSeichel, that place which precedes intellect. But that doesn't imply that all souls are equal.
No, I didn't.
Okay, fine. Okay, you didn't mean to say that.
All languages in the world come from this place of unification. Then they developed. Okay, right, but they're initially coming from a unified source.
Right. Language comes from a particular place amongst all humans. Yeah, absolutely. So then you have to ask yourself, what's the difference between all the other languages and Lashon HaKodesh? Even the name, Lashon HaKodesh, we've learned many times that Kodesh means separate, right? Lashon HaKodesh is separate. It's in a different category. But I'll leave that open for the time being, because now we're talking about language in general. So, yeah. Great. Obechein, therefore, what?
Be a speaking person who reflects godliness in the world. Midaber.
Right. And I would put that as a little twist. Be careful about what you say, because you're drawing from very deep levels of your soul, right? And words. I mean, these are, what do I call them? These are just common things to say. Words can hurt. Words can heal, because they have extreme power, and now we know why, because they come from the deep level of the soul. So be careful with your words. Shmiras haloshon, guard the tongue, which is the delivery mechanism for the deeper levels of the soul. And that's itself as a model for Hashem. He spoke he spoke the world into existence, but he was extremely careful that each thing in existence should have the right connection to the deepest level of godliness. All right, we can leave it there. I said we have, I don't know if it's 7 days, but we have 7 pages. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.